Every great human in history you have ever heard studied this book. This is The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and in it are some of the greatest thinking principles I have ever read about. I mean, this book is pretty much a masterclass in how to win before the fight even starts. Sun Tzu wrote this over 2,000 years ago, never lost a battle, and the book he left behind is still required reading at West Point, Harvard Business School, and inside the boardrooms of the most successful companies on earth. So what I did was take The Art of War and break it down into 8 principles that define how Sun Tzu thinks. In case you don't know that much about Sun Tzu, he was a Chinese general and military strategist who lived around 500 BC. He wrote The Art of War, 13 chapters, about 10,000 words, and it is the most read military strategy book in human history. He was so good at what he did that the king of Wu gave him an army to prove his methods worked. He never lost a single campaign, not one. But what's so interesting about Sun Tzu is not just that he won, it's how he thought about winning, because his entire philosophy was built on one idea that sounds completely counterintuitive the first time you hear it. Principle 1. The winner is decided before the battle starts. And I want to start here, because this is the foundation of everything Sun Tzu ever wrote, and it is the thing that most people completely skip over. Here's what Sun Tzu says. The general who wins makes many calculations in his temple before the battle is fought. The general who loses makes but few. It is by attention to this point that I can foresee who is likely to win or lose. Think about that for a second. He is saying the outcome of the battle is already decided before anyone moves, before any sword is drawn, before any order is given. The winner is the one who planned more completely, who thought through more scenarios, who answered more questions, before the questions became urgent. And the genius of this is what it does to execution. Because when you have already thought through every possible scenario, the unexpected is never actually unexpected. You already have the answer. You just pull it out, which means you move faster, you panic less, and you make better decisions under pressure than anyone who didn't do the work before the pressure arrived. Napoleon did the exact same thing. Before every campaign, he wrote note cards, every possible scenario on the front, his exact response on the back. He wasn't improvising at Austerlitz. He was executing a plan he had already made. Hannibal spent years studying every general before him, so that Cannae wasn't inspiration, it was preparation that looked like genius. Rockefeller did this in business. His biographer says he brooded over problems for extended periods, quietly maturing plans. But once the decision was made, he was a projectile that could never be stopped. The preparation is what made the execution feel inevitable. Most people plan just enough to start. The greats plan until they have already won in their head before they move a single piece on the board. Principle 2. What the enemy believes about you is a weapon. Now here is where the planning leads. Because once you understand that the winner is decided before the battle starts, the first thing great planning reveals is this. Sun Tzu says, appear weak when you're strong. Appear strong when you're weak. And this sounds simple, but think about what it actually means. What your enemy believes about you determines how they position against you, how they allocate their resources, what they prepare for, what they leave undefended. Control that belief, and you are controlling their entire strategy without them knowing it. If you're strong and they know it, they prepare fully. If you're strong and they think you're weak, they drop their guard. That gap between what is real and what they believe is where every great upset in history lives. Hannibal put his weakest troops in the center at Cannae, so Rome could see the weakness clearly. Rome pushed hard through the center, thinking they were winning. They were walking into the trap. The weakness was the weapon. Baldwin IV hid his leprosy for years behind gloves and full armor. By the time his enemies knew how sick he was, his victories had already made that information irrelevant. Amazon looked unprofitable for an entire decade. Wall Street thought they were losing. Competitors thought they were weak. While everyone focused on the losses, Amazon was quietly building the most powerful logistics and cloud infrastructure on Earth. By the time the competition understood what had actually been built, it was already too late to catch up. The enemy can only prepare for what they believe is true. Control what they believe, and you control what they prepare for. Principle 3. Speed makes the deception permanent. And this is where Principle 2 becomes a complete system, because controlling perception only works if you move fast enough that the enemy cannot correct their mistake before it costs them everything. Sun Tzu says, all warfare is based on deception, and speed is what makes the deception work permanently. The two are not separate tools. They are one combined weapon. Here is how it works. You create a false belief. The enemy positions based on that belief. Then you move so fast, hit so hard that by the time they realize the belief was false and try to correct their position, it is already over. The deception bought the window. The speed closed it before they could respond. This is why the greatest upsets in history always look like they came out of nowhere. Because by the time the losing side understood what was actually happening, the flanks were already closed. The bridge was already built. The army was already behind them. Caesar built bridges in a single day that took his enemies 20. The speed of his engineering was itself a form of deception, because nobody believed it was possible until it was already done. Hannibal at Lake Trasimene hid his entire army in morning fog and waited. The fog was the deception. The simultaneous charge from every direction was the speed that made escape impossible. When Elon announced the Tesla Semi, the Roadster, and the Model Y in a single presentation of 3 completely different product directions at once, competitors had no idea which one was the real priority. That confusion was the deception, and Tesla was already building all 3 simultaneously before anyone could organize a coherent response. Deception creates the opening. Speed closes it before the enemy can react. You need both. Neither one works without the other. Drop in the comments, where in your business or your life are you moving slower than you should be because you are waiting for perfect information, genuinely curious? But here is where it gets really interesting, because everything we have talked about so far, planning completely, controlling perception, combining deception with speed, all of it assumes you know where to actually strike. And Sun Tzu thought this was the hardest question of all. Not how to hit, where to hit. Which brings us to the principle that makes the first 3 actually work. Principle 4. Always strike the point that cannot protect. Okay, this is the one. And it is so simple once you see it that you will never be able to unsee it. Sun Tzu says, advance where the enemy cannot defend. Retreat where the enemy cannot follow. That is it. That is the whole thing. Do not attack where the enemy is strongest. Find where they are completely undefended and hit that with everything you have. Every great upset in military history and in business history is just this principle executed at scale. Here's the scene. It is the late 1990s. Hollywood studios are the most powerful entertainment companies on earth. Box office, theatrical release, broadcast television. They have defended every major distribution channel for decades. They are completely dominant everywhere their audience goes. Everywhere except the home. Studios had completely ignored what happened after their movies left the theater. Blockbuster was renting VHS tapes. The experience was terrible. The selection was limited. The late fees were insulting. Nobody in Hollywood thought this was worth fixing because the real money was in theaters. That was the undefended point. Netflix walked straight in. Not by making better movies, not by competing at the box office, by owning the experience that Hollywood had left completely unguarded. And by the time Hollywood understood what Netflix had built, the audience had already moved there. Hannibal did the exact same thing. Rome defended every logical entry point into Italy, the sea, the southern passes. Hannibal crossed the Alps in winter, the one route that Rome had left completely undefended because everyone agreed it was impossible. Caesar crossed into Germanic territory over the Rhine territory Rome was not supposed to enter, which meant nobody was defending it. The undefended point is always there. Your competitor cannot protect everything. Find what they have decided is not worth defending and own it completely before they realize their mistake. I want to know what is the undefended point in your market right now that everyone else has decided is not worth competing for. Drop it below. So far, Sun Tzu has shown us that the winner is decided in preparation before anyone moves. That controlling what the enemy believes is a weapon, that deception and speed work together as one system, and that the point to strike is always the one the enemy left unguarded. And every single one of those principles requires one thing to actually work. Something Sun Tzu thought was rarer and more valuable than any other resource a general could have. Principle 5. Foreknowledge is worth more than any army. This one connects everything. Because think about what the first 4 principles actually require. To plan completely, you need to know the terrain, the enemy, and yourself. To control perception, you need to know what the enemy currently believes. To combine deception with speed, you need to know which direction the enemy is not watching. To find the undefended point, you need to know where every defense actually is. Every single principle is downstream of one thing, knowing more than the enemy before the battle starts. Sun Tzu says, what enables the wise general to strike and conquer and achieve things beyond the reach of ordinary men is foreknowledge, not intuition, not genius, not courage, foreknowledge. Knowing the actual situation more accurately and more completely than the person you are competing against. And he says, this foreknowledge cannot come from calculation alone. It must come from men who know the enemy's situation, which is why Sun Tzu devotes an entire chapter to spies, to intelligence gathering, to knowing before acting. He thought it was the single most important investment any general could make. Genghis Khan sent merchants and spies into every territory years before he invaded. By the time his army arrived, he knew the terrain, the political divisions, the key personalities, and the internal tensions better than most of the locals did. Napoleon read shelves of books on every enemy before every campaign because he wanted to know more than his own generals thought he needed to know. Google's entire business is built on foreknowledge. Search data, maps data, email data, purchase data. Google knows more about what people want, what markets are moving, and what competitors are doing than any other company on earth, and that information advantage compounds every single year. It is not the algorithm that makes Google unbeatable. It is the foreknowledge the algorithm generates. The quality of every decision you make is only ever as good as the quality of the information behind it. Invest in knowing more than your competition before you move. That investment pays back on every decision that follows. Principle 6. Create conditions where winning is inevitable. And here is where Sun Tzu goes somewhere that nobody else goes. Because everything we have talked about so far, the planning, the perception, the speed, the foreknowledge, most people think about all of this as tools that a brilliant individual uses to win through personal genius. Sun Tzu says that is completely wrong, and this is the principle that separates good leaders from truly great ones. He talks about the concept of shi, strategic energy, the momentum of a situation, and he says, the skilled general does not win through personal heroics. He creates the conditions where the energy of the situation makes winning the natural outcome. Like water flowing downhill. You do not push water downhill. You remove the obstacle and it goes there on its own. Think about what that means. The general who has to personally force every win through individual brilliance is fragile. If he is sick, if he is wrong once, if the situation changes, everything collapses. The general who has created conditions where the win is inevitable, that general has built something that works even when he is not in the room. Hannibal at Cannae did not personally kill 70,000 Romans. He created the conditions, the weak center, the elite flanks, the perfectly chosen ground where the Romans destroyed themselves. The strategic energy of the situation did the work. Caesar used Roman honor and shame to stop a mutiny without fighting anyone. He removed the obstacle, and the energy of Roman pride did the work instantly. Jobs understood this completely. He did not personally design every product at Apple. He created conditions, the culture, the standards, the absolute intolerance for mediocrity, where insanely great products were the only acceptable outcome. The energy of that environment produced the results, not his individual genius on every project. Stop trying to personally win every battle. Start building the conditions where winning is just what happens. But here is the thing, and this is the most counterintuitive part of everything Sun Tzu ever wrote. Because all of this, the planning, the perception management, the foreknowledge, the strategic energy, all of it only works if you have mastered the one discipline that almost nobody actually has. Sun Tzu thought it was the rarest quality in any leader. Not courage, not intelligence, not speed. Something much harder than any of those. And it is the thing that makes every other principle in this video actually matter. Principle 7. The battles you don't fight are where you win. Sun Tzu says there are roads which must not be followed, armies which must not be attacked, towns which must not be besieged, positions which must not be contested. And I want you to think about how hard that is to actually do, because everything in us wants to respond, wants to compete, wants to prove we can win every fight. The competitor takes a shot at you, respond. A new market opens up, enter it. Someone attacks your position, defend it. Sun Tzu says that instinct is the thing that destroys great organizations. Every unnecessary fight costs something you cannot get back. Time, resources, attention, morale, and the accumulation of unnecessary fights, unnecessary competitive responses, unnecessary product launches, unnecessary meetings, unnecessary battles destroys organizations that should have won. He says the general who knows when to fight and when not to fight will win, and knowing when not to fight is infinitely harder than knowing when to fight. Here is the scene. It is 2008. Netbooks are everywhere. Tiny cheap laptops selling by the millions. Every analyst in the industry is screaming that Apple has to compete, has to release a cheap, small laptop. Microsoft is doing it. Dell is doing it. Asus is doing it. The pressure on Apple to respond is enormous. Apple ignored it completely, not because they couldn't build a netbook, because they had already decided that battle was not worth fighting. 2 years later, they released the iPad, and the entire netbook category was gone within 18 months. Apple didn't win that battle. They refused it and won anyway. Baldwin IV negotiated truces with Saladin, not from weakness, but from strategy. Every truce bought time to rebuild and reposition, never from a position of defeat, always from demonstrated military capability. Caesar was merciful after victory, specifically because he did not want to fight battles. He did not need to fight every unnecessary enemy. Costs you something you cannot get back. The discipline to not fight the battles in front of you is what preserves everything for the battle that actually matters. 8 principles, and every single one of them has been building to the same idea, the one idea that Sun Tzu put at the absolute center of everything he wrote, the one thing that all 7 principles before it are actually in service of. And it is the most counterintuitive idea in this entire video, which is why we saved it for last. Principle 8, the supreme victory requires no battle at all. Sun Tzu says the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. And I want to close the loop on everything we have talked about, because that line is not a philosophy. It is the logical conclusion of every principle that came before it. Plan completely before you move, so you win before the battle starts. Control what the enemy believes, so they defeat themselves with their own positioning. Combine deception with speed, so by the time they realize what happened, it is already over. Strike the undefended point, so there is no real resistance when you arrive. Build foreknowledge, so nothing surprises you and everything surprises them. Create conditions where winning is inevitable, so the victory is structural, not personal. Refuse the battles that don't matter, so you have everything you need for the battle that does. Every single principle is just a different expression of the same idea. Make the fight unnecessary. Win before it starts. And you see this in every great victory in history once you know what to look for. Genghis Khan's messengers arriving before his army, most cities surrendered without a single arrow because the fight had already been won in the enemy's mind. Hannibal, after Cannae sitting still while Rome's allies defected on their own, the battle was already won. He just let the result do the work. Caesar in Rome arriving, stabilizing the entire financial system in 11 days, and leaving before anyone could organize opposition. The fight never happened, because by the time people considered fighting, he was already gone. And in the modern world, Google made search free, instantly made every competitor's paid search model obsolete. No legal battle, no direct confrontation, no fight at all. The competitor's business model simply stopped working the moment Google's did. That is the supreme victory. The enemy defeated by the move itself before they can even organize a response. This is what Sun Tzu was pointing at for 10,000 words. Not how to fight better, how to make fighting unnecessary. Not how to win battles, how to win before battles start. And here's the thing I keep coming back to after reading this book. Every competition you are in right now, every market you're fighting for, every opponent you're up against, every obstacle in your way has a version of this available to you. The question is not how do I win this fight? The question is how do I make this fight unnecessary? What is one battle you're currently fighting that you can make unnecessary instead of winning? Drop it in the comments. I read all of them. That's Sun Tzu. 8 principles from a man who never lost a battle and whose best victories never required one.